We continue to journey with the wisdom sayings of Jesus as they appear in the Gospel of Matthew. And Matthew frames all of these sayings around the topic of the Sermon on the Mount. But first we start with a reading from Leviticus chapter 19. And I want to share a couple of fascinating things about this reading from the Old Testament. It is really put together or codified in the oral tradition while the Jewish people are on their journey from slavery in Egypt en route to the Promised Land. So while they are in that 40-year desert wandering moment of their history, this particular scripture begins to take shape. And it's fascinating in that it talks about how one is a good steward once one is farming the land or growing a vineyard. And that's in their future because they have not yet arrived in the Promised Land. It also gives us glimpses of the Ten Commandments, how one behaves appropriately with each other, with one's family, and one's neighbor. This is Leviticus chapter 19, verses 1 and 2, and 9 through 18. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to all the congregation of the people of Israel, and say to them, 'You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall not strip your vineyard bare or gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the orphan. I am the Lord your God. You shall not steal. You shall not deal falsely. And you shall not lie to one another. And you shall not swear falsely by my name, profaning the name of your God. I am the Lord. You shall not defraud your neighbor. You shall not steal. You shall not keep for yourself the wages of a laborer until morning. You shall not revile the deaf or put a stumbling block before the blind. You shall fear your God. I am the Lord. You shall not render an unjust judgment. You shall not be partial to the poor or defer to the great. With justice you shall judge your neighbor. You shall not go around as a slanderer among your people, and you shall not profit by the blood of your neighbor. I am the Lord. You shall not hate in your heart any one of your kin. You shall love your neighbor, or you will incur guilt yourself. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against any of your people, for you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord." It's interesting that in each of the sections of that Leviticus reading where God is asking us to behave in a certain way, God says, I am the Lord. This is my wisdom. This is what I share. You will change the world if you live in this way. And the other fascinating piece to the comparison. Imagine, therefore, a typical high school basketball team. It has several passable players, a handful of good ones, perhaps one or two very good ones, yet the coach bears down on all of them. He shows them footage of Jordan in his prime. He immerses them in Jordan's statistics and his style, and he challenges them. No, he requires them to be like Mike, every one of them. Now, this story is prelude to that reading in Matthew today, to be a person in the example of the teacher. And the teacher in this story is saying amazing things about what it means to turn the other cheek, to pray for your enemy, to get along with everyone. You know, in my own existence, I can think about that. I can strive for that. I can strive to be the best possible individual, but I fall back on that innate nature which is not always the best. And when you think about the comparison with Mike Jordan, he was the best on the court. It seemed like he could do anything beautifully, and he was a good sportsman. He got along with everybody. He was just a great player. And in a way, he transformed the game of basketball and really kicked it up a notch. As Emeril on the Cooking Channel would say, kick it up a notch. He did. And God is saying to us in Matthew chapter 5, look at your behavior and kick it up a notch. I do understand the concept of evolution. And sometimes I think with the old reptilian brain in my head, that fight or flight brain that is the primeval part of the way my brain functions. And if someone is angry, out of control, nasty, awful, my immediate response is what? Wash my hands of that situation, turn and walk away, and the less I have to do with that person, the better. Who wants to put up with this garbage? Well, that's my reptilian brain. That's my primitive brain. And God is saying in these readings today, be better than you are. God is asking us in the Leviticus reading even to be holy, to be the kind of person who is able to encounter somebody else's negativism and try to understand that there's probably a reason for that. Maybe we need to learn how in our more sophisticated brain, our more well-trained brain, to think through the fact that maybe this anger isn't all directed at me personally, but it's being born out of something that is stewing, that is churning inside that other person. And instead of being so quick to walk away and wash my hands of the situation, I need to give it some thought. And God would say, if we're asked to be holy, we're supposed to give it effort. We're supposed to respond with a certain attitude of engagement. How can I, and boy, is this the hardest question in the world to ask, how can I change what's going on here? How can I change the fact that somebody is really upset with me or the situation in which he or she is in, and I am the focus of this anger? I am the focus of what this person sees as being wrong in the world. How do we open communication? I have another quote, and I think this is